Greetings, friends. This is Chris Batts, your host of the Law Firm Leadership Podcast. In today's episode, I spoke with the new Chief Legal Officer of one of the largest healthcare providers in the United States. We discussed her career and how she's been called upon during times of crisis and much more. If you haven't already, please subscribe to this podcast and leave a review on iTunes. We interview corporate defense, law firm leaders, partners, general counsel, and legal consultants. You are listening to Episode 49 of the Law Firm Leadership Podcast.
Broadcasting from Kansas City, this is the Law Firm Leadership Podcast. In each episode, you'll receive actionable ideas and hear personal leadership stories of both men and women serving as leaders and executives in the legal industry. Enjoy a front row seat as Chris Batts speaks with general counsel, legal consultants, and law firm leaders and law partners at the top corporate defense law firms from around the United States.
Welcome to the Law Firm Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Batts with the Lion Group. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Verona Dorch, Executive Vice President, Chief Legal Officer of Providence Health in Seattle. Verona joins Providence from Peabody Energy Corp in St. Louis, Missouri, where she has served as an Executive Vice President, Chief Legal Officer, Head of Government Affairs, and Corporate Secretary since 2015. Prior to Peabody, she was at Harsco Corp for 9 years as the Chief Legal Officer, Chief Compliance Officer, and Corporate Secretary. Among the honors and recognition Verona has received, she was named one of the 2020 Top 50 Most Powerful Women in Oil and Gas by the National Diversity Council, appeared in the 2019 Financial Times Global GC20 list, and also named to Black Enterprise Magazine's 2019 list of the most powerful women in corporate America. In 2014, Verona was named a Fellow of the American Bar Foundation. She has a bachelor's degree in Dartmouth College and a JD degree from Harvard Law School. Welcome, Verona, to the Law Firm Leadership Podcast. It's great to have you on the show.
Thank you, Chris, and it is great to be here and to be talking with you today.
Thank you, Verona, for including us as you're starting your journey at Providence in Seattle now. And I'm assuming you're also still getting settled.
Yes. I physically moved to Seattle about 2 weeks ago and have been kind of self-quarantining and unpacking. But it is a beautiful city, just lots of outdoor activities. And so I'm looking forward to getting to know it over the next couple of years.
Verona, I can't help but notice in your in-house career with Peabody, which was a Fortune 500, and Harsco was an extremely large company over 40 countries. Talk to me about this transition to healthcare. Talk to me about why Providence.
It's a very fair question. I'd say with each of my moves, I've been asked why, when I went to Peabody, why Peabody? Before that, why Harsco? And in this case, there are a number of reasons that drew me to Providence. One is, I think at different points in our lives, we all go through this, but I really started to think about, were there ways to marry up the job that I love? I absolutely love being a chief legal officer. I love working with leadership teams, strategy, and everything else. Was there a way to marry that up directly with some type of purpose? Because a lot of what I love to do, whether it's focusing on diversity and inclusion, whether it's focusing on charitable activities or otherwise, were always separate from what I did with work. And Providence was the first time that an offer and the potential of a job came along that offered a way to marry up purpose with job in a way that I've come into Providence and I'm truly a caregiver. I've come into an organization that, was founded in the 1800s by these sisters, these nuns, the Sisters of Providence. And the very purpose from the beginning, that is the continued purpose today, was to found these hospitals, schools across the Northwest that could provide services to the most vulnerable. I mean, our mission is healthcare for all, and we truly provide healthcare to all across 7 states. So I'm coming in and I'm still doing that job, but doing it with a very solid type of purpose. And Providence is not small. I mean, Providence is a $25 billion healthcare system that's across 7 states. We've got 51 hospitals. We treated the first known COVID patient in the U.S. We put, over $1 billion back into the community every year. We have 120,000 employees. So I didn't lose the size and the scope. What I gained was that mission and that purpose.
Verona, let's transition to COVID because you're stepping into what was the epicenter when all this broke out in our country. You just moved across the country in the middle of a pandemic. You're stepping into the senior legal executive role of one of the largest healthcare providers in the country. Share with my readers your perspective as it relates to COVID.
If I could have timed things, I would have timed them a little bit differently, Chris. I think everything happens for a reason. And on the one hand, I took 2.5 months off between Peabody and Providence. And so in the heart of the pandemic, I was in St. Louis and, quite honestly, pretty much confined to my cul-de-sac with my kids doing online schooling. But at the same time, it was just amazing to watch and hear and see what Providence was doing, because a lot of it was getting reported in the press and through interviews and everything else that was being done. And just incredibly heartwarming to come into an organization that at the end of the day is out there literally saving lives. I mean, the heroes do work here in terms of the doctors, the nurses, the clinicians, and others that are doing this incredible job, but also seeing a hospital system that is also part of the solution, right? We are partnering with other companies to figure out the vaccine side of things, to use data to kind of understand whether through the autoimmune response or otherwise, what COVID does to the body, making sure that while this is all going on, we are helping to establish housing in Seattle for our most vulnerable populations. So yes, I'm kind of coming in, you're almost kind of walking right into the storm or the eye of the storm. But at the same time, you have so many things that are going on with this system, and including with the legal team to address this pandemic. And so my job during my time off was to kind of almost casually kind of understand what was going on and think through how can I step in and be of use in that regard, but also to get myself and my son moved here also, he's heading into high school, to get myself and my son here safely. Traveling through an airport in the middle of a pandemic is scary. I think that's the right word to use. And so thinking through how to do that, how to come into this community that has dealt with coronavirus and how to do it safely, including, quite honestly, self-quarantining for 2 weeks. I don't head into the office until tomorrow, which will be my first time going in, because I thought it was very important for me to also step back, given my travel and having movers and everything else, to make sure that I quarantine for a period of time before I headed in. So kind of daunting in its own way to join at this time, but also just incredible to join a system that is doing so much with telehealth and everything else.
It's quite ironic and yet appropriate for you to be called upon at this time. This is not your first crisis, and you have a history of leadership under pressure, Verona. Would you share about your experience at Peabody Energy, how you navigated the bankruptcy and the political headwinds against the coal industry?
If you can see, I have a pattern in terms of my timing for joining organizations. And I joined Peabody in 2015 when Peabody was under attack on all sides. And I think in particular, the Clean Power Plan, on the one hand, completely understand from an environmental standpoint why the Clean Power Plan was put in place. But on the other hand, part of what I was brought in to do in leading at that time legal and government relations was to also try to find a way to work with the Obama administration and afterwards the Trump administration, in the sense of, look, we have thousands of miners who are, this isn't about politics for them, they're doing their job. And if at the end of the day, the key issue is greenhouse gases, then let's focus on greenhouse gases. And here are the things that we're doing from a technology standpoint and otherwise to try to address that. There can be public-private partnerships or other things in that regard, but let's focus on the issue. Let's focus on climate change, not on prematurely crushing an industry. And so there was a lot that we did from a government relations and from a legal standpoint to push back against the Clean Power Plan in that regard, utilizing the court systems, and partnering with a number of other companies, by the way, not only coal companies, but also other industries, railroads, people that would be impacted by the Clean Power Plan, to say, again, this is not the way to deal with climate change, and this is not the way to deal with the issue. And we fought that fight all the way up through the Supreme Court and achieved our goal through getting a stay of the Clean Power Plan. And then we're able to work with the Trump administration and to focus on, again, the technology side and in the other areas that would address the climate change. Now, that doesn't mean that in the time that we were doing that the percentage of the energy mix in the U.S. didn't reduce down in terms of the utilization of fossil fuels. It absolutely did. But then it was also, from a business standpoint, Peabody's job to also find other markets, whether internationally or otherwise, for its coal. And by the way, it was also a time to remind people that coal isn't only used for energy purposes. Coal is also used in the steelmaking process. And so we also have to keep in mind that metallurgical coal, which is used for steelmaking, is still needed to be utilized in the U.S. if we want to remain independent in terms of being able to deal with our infrastructure.
Verona, with all that's gone on with the Obama administration, the Trump administration, the efforts of Peabody, are we moving in the right direction?
That's a really good question. Look, I mean, I think it depends on what you mean by the right direction. It was really interesting being head of government relations and having to deal with government relations for a fossil fuel company. I think in some ways we're moving in the right direction in the sense that these key issues like climate change they're becoming understood by everyone, right? I mean, I have children, you have children. At the end of the day, I want my children to have a world that they and my grandchildren can enjoy. So that discussion was pushed to the forefront, no matter what I may think of the Clean Power Plan. And I think that's the right thing. I think we're getting closer to heading in the right direction with that. If we can at some point get back, I think, to the Paris Agreement and really kind of bring countries back together in a way that they are working together to find solutions. I think under Obama, there really was that push to bring the world together to find a solution to those issues. You can't just fix that issue from a U.S. standpoint. But I think in some ways, we're a very different country today than we were 4 years ago, 8 years ago, right? And, on the one hand, I think today is a snapshot in time, and I always have to keep that in mind. Sometimes you have to go through unrest to come out, I live crisis, right? You have to go through unrest to come out on the other end and continue to be the country that you're meant to be. So I don't know that I find us I know it's maybe controversial, I don't know that I find us any worse today than I necessarily find us 4 or 8 years ago, in the sense that I think this is something that we as a country need to go through. And I'm an immigrant. Like, I came here, my parents brought me here because of the greatness of this country, because of the opportunities that it provides. And I was able to move from being a kid in the inner city who was, we were about as poor as it gets, and through education, able to thrive and strive. And what I think we need is just a way for this country, through all this unrest and everything else that's going on, to figure out what are the key things that we need to continue to focus on. And some of that we're already doing, Chris. We're focusing on diversity and inclusion, and that Black Lives Matter, unfortunately, coming out of something horrendous with the killing of George Floyd. But it's forcing a conversation that we've not had in the many years that I've been in the U.S. So I think out of turmoil can come good and can come progress. I think sometimes, though, when you're in the storm, you can't see that progress. But I think this country is great, has been great, is great, and will continue to be great. But we've got to force ourselves to have the right conversations and make the right changes. And we can never just look at it as any 4-year snapshot of any president.
Hi, listeners. This is Chris Batts, legal recruiter and owner of The Lion Group. My team and I place legal and compliance talent around the United States and are known for our level of communication, speed, and strong track record. If you're an employer hiring your first attorney or first general counsel, or adding talent to your corporate legal department or compliance team, we should talk. Also, if you're a corporate defense law partner or group wondering about your options for a lateral move, we should also talk. Every aspect of our process is confidential, fast, and thorough. Contact us by going to our website, findthelions.com, or you can text the word headhunter to the number 44222, and then complete the web form and we'll follow up with you shortly. Now back to the show. Verona, let's talk about the process of convergence. When you were at Peabody and assessing outside counsel, this process you were taking them through as a true request for diversity and inclusion, the RFP process. Would you explain to my listeners what happened?
When I went into Peabody, there were probably 100 plus law firms that we were utilizing. And so it was very hard, I think, to really have any influence over those law firms in the sense of billing from an alternative fee arrangement standpoint or staffing in the sense of we want the best lawyers and we absolutely want diversity with those great lawyers. And so we stepped back and we worked with a group called Advanced Law with a lawyer named Rose Gatu, who's a former law school classmate of mine. We worked with him to put together an RFP that was focused on the areas that were key to us. So step one was, okay, we have to have a manageable number of law firms. So we went down to approximately 12 law firms, where some were going to be kind of our day-to-day law firms, and we really wanted regional, St. Louis-based, Chicago-based, for example, law firms in that mix who were more cost-effective and quite honestly could come in and I think get to know our business better. We wanted law firms that would commit to alternative fee arrangements, whether that was buckets of work for certain dollars, whether it was success fees or otherwise. We were finding that straight billing for everything was not necessarily working. But we also wanted law firms, and we stressed this throughout, that were going to commit as we were to diversity and inclusion, and not only in the sense of putting up diverse lawyers for matters, but also in the sense of who were the relationship partners that we were dealing with. And if we had 12 law firms, we ended up with about half of those relationship partners that were diverse, whether diverse in race, diverse in gender or otherwise. We also wanted to have an impact on those law firms. So once we picked those 12 law firms, I and my head of legal operations went out to those law firms on a month, at least one per month, to meet with them, to sit down with them and talk about not only the financial side of things, but also diversity and inclusion, asking them to give us opportunities to speak to their associates, give us opportunities to mentor those associates, partner with us, and us jointly having interns, again, from various law firms and reaching beyond the top 10 law firms to find those diverse individuals that would spend 8 weeks at their firms and 2 weeks with us. So they also got the in-house experience. So we really wanted to partner with them to figure out not only diversity in the sense of the work, but diversity in the sense of how are you building diverse classes? How are you making diverse partners? And we'd send in letters to the committees as they were making people partner, talking about the work that they were doing and why it was important to us that they make it to the partnership ranks. What is it about your model that might not be working to help with this? And how can we, again, it's not my job to come in and tell a law firm how to run itself, but how can we kind of acknowledge some of those things that aren't working? And then you as a law firm can kind of think through how to fix that. And we use data. I mean, at the end of the day, if you don't measure it, it's not going to change. So we absolutely use data that we would pull from the law firms on a monthly basis in terms of who was working on their matters, what was the spend looking like, and have conversations with them, again, on a monthly basis to talk that through, to push for change where change needed to come, and to ensure utilizing the data that change was happening. And we got to a point where a lot of those law firms were doing things on their own, even beyond what we were asking for. And so it was just a very successful way to, internally, what we're able to demonstrate back to our finance team, to the business teams, was here's how we're bringing down costs 10, 15, 20% per year because we've gone through this convergence. To the legal team, we're able to talk about that, but also talk about the transformation of who was working on our matters. And then with the law firms, we were working with them directly to also change how they were doing business. So when you're spending millions, I think you have a say in how you spend those millions and who you spend them with. And so it was just a great project. It's being continued on by the team that's there now. And it's something that I'm looking at now with Providence and the law firms that we work with to try to not necessarily put in place that exact same program, but certainly start to think it through. And I also want to be clear, when we talked about diversity, it was racial diversity, gender diversity, but also differently abled, veterans, LGBTQ. We wanted all diversity on our matters and in working with us.
Verona, can you share a couple, say, takeaways as you did this? Imagine if you had a room full of senior legal executives who are either entertaining this or have been thinking of it. What advice would you give them?
I think one takeaway I would have is you have to, spend a lot of time thinking about change management, and that includes taking your legal team along the journey, taking the business team along the journey, and taking your law firm along the journey, because everyone is not going to be bought in from day one, or that you may get the head nod, but that doesn't mean that you have true buy-in. So you have to be persistent. You have to have a common message, and you have to push forward. The second takeaway that I would have is you have to use data. If you don't measure it, if you're not able to show the month-to-month, the year-to-year change, I think it's very hard to take law firms along that journey, and it's very hard to take your company along that journey of why these changes are happening. And I think the third thing is, I think you not only have to do it because it's right, I think you have to also develop your own level of passion for it, because if you as the GC aren't driving it and aren't similarly partnering with other GCs that are making these changes, and if you don't care about it, I think others, whether it's the law firms, your lawyers, or others, are going to pick up on that. And so I think thinking through why it's important to you and why this is the right thing to do is important, and then being able to articulate that back and make sure that you've developed the vision for why this is going to happen, because it's going to happen over years, I think is key.
Verona, let's talk about your board experience. You just transitioned off the board of the Enterprise Bank and Trust after serving for nearly 2 years. I get approached by a lot of legal executives saying, Chris, how do I get on a board? They're usually either a legal executive or they're looking to retire and do this. Would you share this dynamic with my listeners? What was it like to be on a for-profit board? How did that door open for you? And maybe how could it open for others?
It's a good question. So first of all, the experience of being on a for-profit board was incredible. Having gone through the bankruptcy with Peabody, I felt like there were a lot of skills that I picked up that really were kind of business skills. And so I was able to kind of step back and start talking to people like yourself about how can I, this is what I've gone through in the last couple of years. How can I translate that onto board? What I did was actually put myself through a program with another search firm that had an arm that was starting to focus on boards, where they were training and preparing particularly minority executives to be on boards. But they also had some senior business people that would be in those meetings that were, first of all, listening to you and learning about your background, but then also coaching you in the sense of putting together a board CV, preparing for that first board interview. But also, quite honestly, they were the beginnings of a network shift, because I think a key part of it is you have to shift your network. My network was probably primarily other GCs and primarily lawyers. And the first advice I got was you have to start socializing with the people who know about board positions, which are either people that are on boards, CEOs, including your own CEO and your own board members, and then ensuring that they know about your interest and that they start promoting you. And so there were 3 or 4 CEOs that were in that room that I connected with right away, and they started to introduce me to other people in St. Louis who, as soon as they heard about the Enterprise Bank position, there were literally 2 or 3 people that were recommending me to that board, and that's how I got the board call. So, still kind of working through that more informal process versus kind of the board search process that some search firms do. But what I found was I had to kind of go out there and advocate for myself differently, put together a very different CV, and then talk about and think about my skills differently. It doesn't mean that I de-emphasize the legal skills, but I certainly did focus more on dealing with crisis skills, risk mitigation, the financial skills and credit type skills that I picked up that started to make a lot of sense to a bank So I was able to join that board and then also serve on the risk committee and the credit committee, continuing to build my credentials on the financial side versus focusing on necessarily going onto the governance committee, where I think I would have probably been more naturally comfortable. But I really felt I needed to, it's like if you play tennis and you got that one strong arm, you got to focus on, okay, what are the things I'm going to do to make sure that the other arm bulks up too.
Verona, that was a lot of really great advice. Thank you. I'm assuming that was a paid board role, correct?
It was a paid board role, and quite honestly, the course that I went through also had to be paid for. And it was an interesting situation because the company was not necessarily interested in putting me through the course, but I actually paid for it myself. I wanted to invest in my own future and thought it was important to kind of figure out that side of things. And it obviously paid off in that regard. But yes, it was a paid board position. And as you noted, I stepped down, but certainly will be looking to go back on to other boards. It was called the Directors Academy, and Major Lindsay in Africa has put together, sorry to talk about your competitors, Chris, but they put together a board arm of their search business, which is called Allegiance Partners. And it was just a great program. I think it was over the course of, I want to say maybe 2.5 days. It was out of Chicago. They did an incredible job.
Verona, next question. How do you define leadership?
It's a really good question. I believe leadership is different for different people, and it depends on the circumstances you're in. I can primarily speak to leadership as it pertains to me and the types of situations that I've been in. I think leadership is about having the courage to lay out a vision in a way that at the time you laid out, not many others may necessarily understand it, agree with it, or get it. And then your job is to take them. I had a CEO who would always say, well, you have to take people on the journey. So you see it and you see the end point, but you have to take people from the beginning to the end, and you have to find a way to get their buy-in. Because if you're not leading people somewhere, then I don't think you're really leading. And I think those are skills that, there's always this nature versus nurture debate with leadership. And I think leadership and leadership skills are learned, in my opinion. And I think they're different in different situations. Me as a leader in crisis is very different than me as a leader in peacetime. Me as a leader of the legal function is different from me in the room as, an executive vice president and the leader of the company, or being external facing or otherwise. So you have to be comfortable with different styles of leadership. You have to be comfortable with different types of decision making, but you have to be smart enough to know when to apply which style of leadership and what it is you're trying to accomplish. And again, how to take people on that journey.
Verona, who has been examples of leadership for you?
I'd say my first examples of leadership were probably my parents. Who kind of on a leap of faith, my father was from Jamaica, my mother's from Guyana in South America. They moved to England, started to raise this young family, and decided that the opportunities that they wanted for their children were not there. And they made this decision to move to America. My father moved first, and then it took us another 7 years to get green cards to be able to move. And so to me, that's a level of, what I just talked about. Like, you've got this vision and you kind of have to take people, in this case, your family, along this journey of this is all going to work out and it's all for the better. So just seeing the sacrifices, but also just that strong belief in America is the place for our kids was just incredible to me. The way that it motivated me and my siblings to want to succeed here was just incredible. So those to me are the first leaders and the first individuals that kind of laid out to me how you can achieve anything, if you put your mind to it. Beyond that, I've just had incredible influencers and leaders and sponsors throughout my career, starting with my teachers in high school who helped me dream bigger than I could dream in terms of the colleges I could go to and the law schools, and invested an incredible amount of time outside of school in in helping guide me in that regard. The first mentor that I had as I came into my legal career, Marcia Sims at Counsel, who headed up the summer associate program and was just one of the first African-American women to graduate from, an incredible college to become a lawyer, to become a partner, and to see her as a role model for what I wanted to accomplish and how much time she put into young lawyers was incredible. Someone even today, I still keep in touch with. As I became a general counsel, people like Lloyd Johnson, who was completely invested in diversifying the Fortune 500 in increasing the number of diverse GCs within the Fortune 500, was someone that I was lucky to get to know just before I became a GC who introduced me to incredible GCs. Michelle Coleman Mays, who just has an incredible story and journey. Tom Sabatino, who has held key roles at so many incredible companies. And as I mentioned, going through the board membership program and meeting people like James White and others who are just, these incredible CEOs who are very much focused on giving back. So I think you're hearing some themes there. Like I said, I've either been incredibly lucky with people that I've been introduced to. I'm not shy, so I've also reached out to people. I've read about them, and I just think they have incredible journeys. I've reached out to them to get connected. And quite honestly, as I head into healthcare, which is a brand new industry for me, there are people that I'm meeting day to day who have been incredible. Alfreda Bradley Core, for example, is someone I spoke to last week who just reached out and said, I want to be a resource for you as you go along this journey. Nancy Jessen with United Health, who I've known for decades, people that have just reached in and said, this is a new industry for you, and we're here to help you along that path. I don't think we should ever get to a point where we're embarrassed to reach out, embarrassed to seek help, or embarrassed to ask questions, no matter what point we're in our career. And I'm deep into my career, and I'm still incredibly thankful for the people who are still there and just providing support and just an ear when I want them to listen.
Verona, if you had a room full of women and diverse attorneys, what advice would you give them right now?
I think the first advice I would give them is just to hold on, to just continue on. I mean, this has been an incredible year, whether because of COVID, because of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor. I mean, this has been a hard year. I've not cried as much as I've cried in this year. And I think we have to hold on because they are the future of law, whatever industries they're in, the future of raising their kids to be good people. So just hold on. This too will pass. I promise you. I would also encourage them, just as I was just saying, to reach out. I mean, there are people that reach out to me all the time, and I take those calls. I take the reach out on LinkedIn. And people like me are here to act as mentors, to act as sounding boards, to act as whatever it is that you need in a trusted way to help support you on that journey. But also support each other. When I was coming up, there weren't as many women. And what I'm seeing today with people supporting each other, and when I moved to St. Louis, one of the first things that someone said to me was, "You just have to find your tribe, and then you'll be fine." And so I'm trying to piece together my tribe, my personal board of directors, with people that I'm meeting on a day-to-day basis. And I would say, find your tribe, find that group of people that you trust, that you can talk to, and not only diverse lawyers. I mean, the people that I described are white males, women, white women, African-American women, and others, immigrants. Find that group of people that can be supportive to you and that you can also support. But then also, when you get to a particular point in your career, you have to pay it forward. You have to reach back and pull folks up. You have to act as a mentor and everything else yourself. You have to reach out also to vulnerable individuals. It isn't the perfect associates that everyone loves that you should only reach out to. It's also those struggling associates, those struggling individuals, those diamonds in the rough, because I was a diamond in the rough, and there were people that reached out and mentored and nurtured and helped. You have to reach out to those folks and attempt to help them too. But going back to what I first said, just hold on. Things are changing. They're changing for the better. And we're going through what I would consider bumps in the road. And you just have to get past those bumps in the road with the support of others.
Verona, let's transition to personal. You already shared with us that you have an immigrant past. Would you share with my listeners a little bit more about your parents and even going forward, knowing that your kids are doing that virtual classroom thing? Can you give us a little synopsis on your family life in the past and currently right now?
Sure. So my father, as I noted, was an immigrant from Jamaica. He worked in construction, very much blue collar, didn't even kind of complete middle school. I mean, just had to work for his family and just, again, used grit and determination to get somewhere and to dream for his kids. He passed away this year in his 80s, but lived a full life. My mother is an immigrant from Guyana, which is in South America. Kind of same thing, just a true believer in education, in working hard, in the dream of America. And so they raised 3 kids to really just take advantage of everything that this country has to offer. I continue to pass that kind of immigrant approach to life onto my kids. I raise them as though they're immigrants. I'm not sure that they're always thrilled by that. And in the sense that education is key, completely take advantage of the educational system that is in this country. But I also raise them to believe that they are children of the world. My daughter has traveled to countless countries, whether to study, to work, to get to know other people and other cultures, has friends from all over the world. She goes to the University of Pennsylvania, and just, I've always instilled in my kids that you're children of the world, and it's your job to get out there and understand other people and listen and learn from their experiences. And they absolutely have both taken that in, including my son, who will be heading into high school in the fall. And I just look at the diverse individuals that he's friends with, and he's taken that to heart. So I just feel very, very blessed and very lucky to have lived the journey that I've lived. It was hard in the beginning, and definitely developed grit and determination and things that still drive me today. And, excited with my son and with my daughter when she comes home to just start this new journey with a new city in Seattle. I don't know a lot about Seattle, but I'm looking forward to learning about it and learning and working with the Providence team as I head out on this next journey.
Thank you for sharing, Verona. Let's jump to reading. What books are you reading right now? What are open? Do you use paper? Do you use Kindle? How do you go about that?
I'm old-fashioned with reading. I grew up, I love to read. So I like the touch of a book. I still buy books, off of Amazon. One of the things that I'm reading is, as I headed into a new job, I stepped back. I'm actually rereading a couple of books. So I stepped back and I'm rereading The First 90 Days by Michael Watkins. Because I really wanted to come into Providence. And it's probably one of the few jobs I've been able to come in and really go through that first 90-day process, that listening tour, that learning in industry, the business, the people. And so I kind of wanted that book as a backdrop. Another book that I'm kind of probably more flipping through again, because I've read it so many times, I don't want to read it again from back to front, is 11 Rings by Phil Jackson. It is just one of my favorite leadership books that, going back to your question about leadership, really forces you to step back and kind of think about different styles of leadership and the impact of that on others. I'm also, just from a fun standpoint, no matter the Clean Power Plan, I just had a lot of respect for the Obamas. And so I'm reading Becoming by Michelle Obama. And I've just started that. And again, reading it in hardcover. And I hope to also eventually watch the Netflix documentary. And then another book that I've gone back to, the beauty of packing up my old home and moving into a new home, is you kind of pack up and read and see books that you really haven't looked at in years. And some of the books that as I was in college and as I came out of college that I absolutely loved were books by Chinua Achebe, a Nigerian writer that are just incredible. And so I am rereading Things Fall Apart. Part of it, I think, is I'm rereading it. I think just given a lot of the turmoil that is happening in America right now, but it takes a look at discord and clashes between cultures and things like that really just kind of, in some ways, I think resonates with what's going on today. And so I decided to kind of, I had the flights and everything else to kind of step back and take another look at that book. But Chinua Achebe is absolutely one of my favorite authors that I was introduced to in college. And it's just an incredible writer.
Yeah. Thank you, Verona. Last question for you. What are your superpowers?
I think my greatest superpower is to be able to see into the future in a sense. And I think that is that setting vision concept that I talked about. And then it's almost to be able to come back and take others into the future with me along that leadership journey. I think maybe also the ability to heal. I do feel, and I don't know if it's because I've taken a lot of psychology classes or I have a particular sensitivity, but I do feel like I have a connection of how people are feeling. It's not just about someone doing good work. Are they doing it and is it making them happy? And so that ability to kind of make sure that people ultimately end up doing what they love and helping them kind of sort through what they're doing today, where they want to go, and kind of how to get there, I think is also a pretty important superpower, I think, particularly in these times.
Definitely. So I have to agree. Thank you for sharing, Verona. It's been an honor and a pleasure. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you. I really enjoyed this, really enjoyed the opportunity. And I love that you do this and you give folks the opportunity to hopefully share some wisdom and share some thoughts that resonate with your viewers.
Thank you, everyone who listened to this episode of the Law Firm Leadership Podcast. If you haven't already, please take a moment and subscribe. Also, we would love your feedback. You can leave feedback in 3 easy ways. You can go to the blog post on our website. You can click Give Feedback link in the show notes on your device. And then thirdly, you can text the phrase LFL podcast to the number 44222. That's LFL PODCAST. And thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Law Firm Leadership Podcast. This podcast is for education purposes only. This content cannot be used for commercial use without written permission from the Lion Group. If you like this podcast, leave a review on iTunes.